board. Well, this is the important part anyway. We're going to go to another screen. Well, we're going to go back to the same screen. And we're going to look at pronouns. Yes, please.
So there is a kind of noise which is persistent, and it is somehow irritating. Well, I don't know where it is coming from.
Whoops, I just cut Sonny off. He was speaking. Sorry, Sonny, you'll have to unmute. But I think we have, usually any sound coming over as a result of a student not being muted. So the important thing is that all of you mute your microphones, and when you need to speak, unmute, and then as soon as you finish speaking, mute. Then we don't have that background noise. That's usually the cause.
So the sound is okay now. It is good now.
Okay. We're going to begin here in chapter 18. I want to go out a little bit further than the chapter actually does. And I will ask you in the homework to read the chapter 18, but you are experienced students by now, so I don't have to look at the chapter necessarily. I want to make some notes of other things. First of all, students in CRST 272 do not yet possess copies of Burra-Miller or Kubo. These are 371 Greek 3 textbooks. I haven't mentioned these. I probably should have before you went to campus to pick up anything, especially KMP, the textbook and the laminated pages. But these copies you may borrow from Ms. Zenaria. There are still copies left of Burra-Miller is the new version of Kubo. The difference is that Burra-Miller weighs about 1.5 pounds more than Kubo, but accomplishes pretty much the same thing. It does have, Burra-Miller is newer. It is supposed to be the replacement for Kubo, and it is a very nice replacement, but it is so heavy to carry around that and Kubo is much cheaper to purchase used copies, and I've found several used copies on eBay here in the US that I brought over in previous trips to FC College. So there are several copies of Kubo there, or when those run out, Burra-Miller is available. These are not yet necessary, but you will probably want to procure them at some opportunity. I didn't think when I often don't think of connect things together as I should. Usually I'm on campus and we're meeting on campus and we have a cabinet in the room on campus. And so all these books are in that place, but in this situation, we're not. So go ahead and at some point procure one of these two. You don't need both. They both do the same thing. What they do is they give you the meanings of words that are not used 30 times or more. So there are words that are more seldom used, and they allow us to read the Greek text without having to look up so many words in a dictionary, which can become very tedious. You have an appendix in your textbook, access to Logos software. We don't have that. So that appendix, but it's also, there's also a reference to it on pages 171 and 72 in your textbook. I think that's in chapter 18. I wanted to mention that as well. And you do not need to worry about that. Let's see, I'm just checking in the 6th edition because the page numbers have changed. Reference to Kubo. Logos, yeah, the page numbers are different. 175, section 18.2, page 175. So the page numbers I've neglected to change here on my presentation. But if you'll just make that change, not pages 171 and 72, but in your textbook, page 175, and the appendix, the last appendix in the book. No, it's not the last appendix. It is appendix J, using Logos. That is now in the 6th edition, if you possess that one. The 5th edition may have a shorter version of that. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have the 5th edition of the textbook here. I only have the 6th. All I'm saying about this is you don't need to worry about it, because we are not using Logos software. I'm not really a fan of using, I am a fan of using Logos software, but it's very expensive, and not at this point, rather not at this point, because we need to become much more familiar with the language before we start using software. Otherwise, we become lazy and don't really get it into our hearts as well. On the next page, you have reference to Buehler-Miller and Kubo, and I've just explained those. You can read on page 176 and 177. You can also borrow those, but there's no hurry. You don't have to go back to campus the second time and write tomorrow or the next day. But eventually, sometime this semester, we will have begin to read. And I would suggest that you go ahead when at your leisure, procure that. And I apologize again for not mentioning Buehler-Miller and Kubo. And he explains, I won't go into the page numbers right now, 176, 177. For the time being, the Greek lexicon at billmounts.com is quite sufficient for our needs to look up words that are not in our textbook, not in the verses that we translate. So if you're, I don't know what that word means. Billmounts.com, you just get used to using it. It's billmounts.com-Greek dictionary. And that will get you right to the Greek dictionary. And so we have a freeware source without having to purchase anything. If you do want to purchase a Greek dictionary, I would suggest the Barclay-Newman lexicon. It's a small, compact lexicon that you can purchase from Missionaria on campus. And I think I made a special price of 500 rupees for this one this semester. There's some left, or there should be. It's a small one. It doesn't have a lot of information in it, but it has quite a bit more than previous editions. The new revised edition is a nice little book. So I would suggest having those. Now, speaking of lexicons, and you'll come back to this page in just a moment, but I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording. I'm going to ask pushing. And going to share that verse you just looked at and make sure, if I can, that everyone is understanding. First of all, tauta is a pronoun referring to hutos. You remember the haute is the feminine, but the neuter is tuta, and the plural of tuta is tauta. And when this word is put into a sentence, we translate in English these things, neuter plural. De is something like now. It changes just slightly the emphasis. It is a pronoun. No, sorry, it is a conjunction, like and translations often simply translate it and, but for and we have kai. I'll talk about conjunctions later in the semester. For and we have kai, but de is a little bit different. It is used purposely, usually by authors in the Greek New Testament, to indicate that there perhaps even a paragraph change. There were no paragraphs in their text. They only had lines across the page, but it was a way of indicating, okay, now I'm changing subject, or I'm changing the emphasis, or there's just a slight change. It depends on how often the author uses it. Matthew tends to use it more, Mark even more, I think. But these things, well, we have a difference of opinion on what the next word means. This verb means to consider, and I don't expect you to know it. And this is the aorist middle form, which I also wouldn't expect you to know. And it is a participle, which I also wouldn't expect you to know. So you're not expected to know any of those things. But I'll just say that there's a difference of opinion among interpreters. And here we come to beginning to see in the second year of Greek study that we are entering the period in which interpretation enters into the picture. And it's not just a matter of this word means that, but it's a question of, well, what is the sense of the meaning here? And we will have, we have many different translations in English, and this is one of the reasons why, because interpreters are divided over how a word is meant to be used. Is the word saying while Joseph was considering these things, or after Joseph considered these things? And normally the aorist tense does have the sense of after these things. So Joseph was considering the fact that Mary is pregnant, and he knows that they haven't had relations, so the child is not his. So he's considering what to do, and he's about to divorce her, but not publicly. Although he was a righteous man, and I think, actually, I will come back to that participle in the previous verse 19. He does not want to divorce her publicly as the law requires. And we have already an indication that the gospel of Jesus Christ changes, in a sense, the way we fulfill the law. We don't fulfill the law necessarily by just practicing traditional ways that are interpreted about the law of God. We do follow the law of God. It does not, we do not diminish its importance, but Jesus is Lord, and that changes who fulfills the law. And then we have the word idu. which means in Old English translations, behold. I would say today something like, focus on this, look at this. I want you to see this. After Joseph had considered these things, he was troubled by them. He is mulling over them, what to do. What action do I take now? I can't take Mary as my wife. She's pregnant, and everyone will know this is not my child. Or they will assume we've had relations and we have not. And I can't let that stand either. So what do I do? And look, the angel of the Lord, angelos kuriou. I hope that by now you are familiar with the genitive case enough to know that this is the angel of the Lord. In a dream, kat onar. Now, we would expect the word in, because in English we use in a dream, but they don't. They use according to a dream. Onar is a dream, a word that you wouldn't know. That's fine. There are many words we don't know yet. According in a dream, an angel of the Lord, ephane, appears, makes himself visible, or appears to him, and he is saying, legon, as chapter 20. We will get to participles and we'll see, then we'll be able to translate lego and this ending, which we don't know yet. Notice then the semicolon, or also, actually, I would suggest that in this context, this is a colon. That should be, in English, we would have 2 dots. This is what the angel of the Lord is saying. Notice the present tense, interestingly, and we'll talk about why the present tense is important. Joseph, Yosef, Huios David, me phobethes para laben Marian ten gunaika su. Now, all of these words, if you have paid attention to our previous chapters, you should be able to translate. Son of David, Huios David, son. We can't tell that David is in the genitive, but it is. There's no article with David, so that throws us off a bit, but it must be genitive. It can't be anything else. Son of David, me phobethes para laben. And we have the subjunctive. And you don't know the aorist passive form, but I will say right now, get used to it. The theta, eta, theta, and then eta is very often, almost always, a sign that we have the aorist passive form. Passive means the action happens to the subject rather than the subject doing the action. But this is what we call a deponent verb. Phobetomai in the vocabulary means I fear. Some dictionaries list it simply as phobeo and the active voice, but most dictionaries list it as deponent as phobeomai. Remember erchomai and ginomai from chapter 9, when we learned the deponent verbs that appear, look, middle or passive in the lexicon, but are usually translated in the English as active. We'll have a lot more to say about those in especially in Greek 4. But for right now, we just notice that this is translated actively, even though it looks like it is a passive form. Me phobethes. So we have a subjunctive, aorist subjunctive form. We have a subjunctive ending. Now, the question was, how is the subjunctive used here? And I want you to get used to that question. I'm not asking, what form is this? I've already told you what form it is. It's a subjunctive form. What I'm asking you is one of 10 uses, and you should be able to know those 10 uses of the subjunctive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 9 are listed in KMP. 10 you should have written underneath. It's the noun use. It's explained by Dr. Campbell in one of his video segments. So if you haven't looked at his video segments, there's 2 of them. I put them back up for you to see. By all means, do that so you understand the 10th one. I would break into groups right now, but time-wise is always short. So would someone answer my question? Which use of the subjunctive did you answer here on your quiz?
Can I?
Prohibition.
Prohibition.
Exactly, yes. Prohibition. Students sometimes confuse this with the emphatic negation, but you can't have emphatic negation unless you have ou me, and we don't have ou me. Furthermore, you don't have usually the subjunctive with the emphatic negation, but here you do. And ou would normally not be used outside of the indicative mood. We have or mode. We have here simply may. Some interpreters actually go so far as to say that usually the aorist prohibition means do not, let's see, stop fearing. No, do not begin to fear. What we call inceptive. Do not begin to fear, and the present tense would have been, if he had used the present tense, stop fearing. You are fearing, and so you should stop. That was what I was taught when I was learning Greek. And I think in many cases it still holds, but since we've had computers and are able to do much further analysis and compare versus, we've had to come to the conclusion that there's so many exceptions that we can't make a rule out of that. This is the possibility. Do not start fearing. I think more is the question. If I were preaching on this passage, which I shouldn't be doing right now, I would be tempted to talk about the fact that Christians often live in fear. And we are told so often, do not be afraid. Don't start being afraid. And if you are, stop being afraid. Because we are not to live in fear. I don't know about your country, but in America, with so little persecution, actually, from the outside, we enjoy a freedom here of worship that hardly any people have ever enjoyed in the world history. And in spite of it, we are afraid. Conspiracy theories abound. Fear. I think it is Satan's attempt to keep us from talking about Jesus. So we fear. We fear the government. People don't want to get vaccinated because the government is requiring it, and the government is Antichrist or whatever. I don't know. There's the church. I don't want to talk about vaccinations right now. What I want to say is the church is tempted to live in fear. We are afraid of things. And if God is great if God is so majestic and created us, and we are created in his will and image, and he has a purpose for each of us that he has planned, a way for us to walk, then he is in control. If God is in control, then why are we afraid? Why do we live in fear? Now, it's normal to be afraid in circumstances, but it is not normal to let fear have us. We have some fear, yes, but we should not be controlled by it. I've already started to preach, and I said I wouldn't. Mais phobe face.
Come on, you can.
True. Yeah, I'll stop. Paralabin. Then we have an infinitive, and what used to
That's
be
complimentary, sir.
Yes, it is. Of course, that was an easy
Complimentary.
question. I'm glad you saw it so
Very
easily.
easy question.
Phobeomai is a verb, also one of those verbs that needs an infinitive to complete it. So we call that complementary. It completes the act, the meaning of what is it? Do not be afraid of what? To fear, to take, paralabein, to yourself. To take to yourself, marry your wife. Now, you would say, wait a minute, they're not married yet. Yeah, yes, they actually are, because she's betrothed to him, and in the eyes of Jewish culture, that is a binding agreement between families. And since that agreement has been made, the consummation of the marriage physically is in the future, but the actual contract has already been made. And so he is being told, do not fear to take her, to complete the contract. And then additional information is given with the conjunction gar. For that which in her, and in her, of course, in alte, alte is a pronoun. In the dative case with the preposition in her, genao is the verb that we have then genathen. It's not genomai in the aorist tense. That would be one possibility, but we have two news. When we have two news, we don't have the verb genomai, we have the verb genao. And again, we have this aorist passive, which I wish we don't get until chapter 24. But there's this theta in here. And in addition to that, we have a participle, which we do get in chapter 20. That which has been born in her from the Spirit is holy. And this is a very interesting form. We would expect ek pneumatos hagiou, from the Holy Spirit. Esteem is from the Holy Spirit. Instead, we get from the Spirit is holy. And another way of emphasizing in Greek is to put a word like this at the end, out of order, that we might expect, moving the order around outside of the order that we would normally expect. A conjunction, yes, first, and then maybe an emphasis particle that would come, okay, and then a verb form. It would be the normal Greek, but to place something forward, as we do. Let's see, I think further in the sentence, in her, for example, in this clause, that which is in her has been conceived. We would probably translate here, from the Spirit is holy. It is chosen, it is set apart by the Holy Spirit. And just because, of course, the neuter is used, that which ta, genethen, ta is neuter. Doesn't mean that the baby is not considered a person. Many words in Greek are, of course, in the neuter gender. Every grammatical point here is of huge interest, but my main point was to ask how you did, and I'm glad that you immediately came up with the correct answers. Let's go back to our pronouns, because we're now moving to chapter 18. Need to move ahead. And we are looking at, in this chapter, the not indefinite. Chapter 18 is the relative pronoun. Left me for a moment. The relative pronoun, which we see here, is used 1,551 verses in the New Testament. So it has great importance. Not nearly as much as the personal pronoun, but there are several personal pronouns. So perhaps we're not so much surprised. All this to show us that there is a need for us to recognize pronouns. Pronouns are words that serve as nouns, but are not specific. He, she, it as part of the personal pronouns. But there are others as well that we have gotten to know. They're not nouns, but they serve as nouns, substitute as nouns. And we have met most of these. Whoops, before I go on. Let me drag this to the bottom. Reciprocal, one another. It usually appears in the genitive case. I'm not sure if all of these we have had. We've had the intensive pronouns, autos, aute, auto. We've already said he himself, for example, autos, or to use the personal pronoun along with the verb ending would also be, in certain contexts, intensive. We also have reflexive, of himself, of yourself, of herself. No, this is emaltu, of her, of myself. All right, yeah, of myself, se autu, of yourself. If you haven't had these in your vocabulary yet, don't worry, they will come. We have had tis and ti in chapter 15. And when we have the accent, we have who and what or why. This word can also mean why with the accent, but if it doesn't have the accent, then it means a certain one, a certain thing. This would be neuter form. This is the masculine and feminine form. And we're coming now to the relative pronoun. We've had the demonstrative pronoun, this and these, hutos, haute, and the neuter is tuto. We've had that, I believe, in chapter 13, if I remember correctly, or in one of those chapters previously. And we've had all of the personal pronouns. So by now you should know them. So let me just go through. I'm not going to take time with all of these, but if you notice here are personal pronouns at the bottom of the slide. Ego, humes, autos. And also here, these are listed by the number of times it's used. So they're not all in the same place. Su, which is you singular. And humes is you plural. You notice that it is used in the plural much more often than the singular. But still the singular su for you is used over 1,000 times. So we still need to know it. Well, humes, you plural. Very nice thing in the Greek New Testament that we don't get confused whether an author is speaking to one person, you, or to a group, you plural. And notice the use of the personal pronoun autos, he, she, and it, 5,596 times. I'll send you this presentation. I hope I'm not making promises each time that I don't keep, but I'll send you these presentations. If I haven't done so previously, I will catch up. In vocabulary 16, we had this one, ekainos, that or those, which is what we call the far demonstrative pronoun, hutos, the near demonstrative pronoun. You don't necessarily have to know the grammatical terms for these. So I'm not going to ask you, what is the near demonstrative pronoun? And you have to answer hutos, or the far demonstrative pronoun. In other words, this, which is close by, that, which is further away, that over there, ekainos, ekene, ekenon. I'm not going to ask you the grammatical term, but I will ask you the meaning. That or those. And another thing to remember, even when a word is not used as often as other words, that can mean that it actually has more importance, because when the author does use it, a word which is not used very often, it has a special importance. And ekainos does have a special importance. When an author uses it sometimes, not always, but sometimes, he is singling it out for special emphasis. You need to watch this thing that I'm talking about, that the author wants to learn that. Okay, all of this to kind of get us back into pronouns, because in chapter 18, we're learning a new pronoun, but we need to keep it in its context of all the pronouns that we already know. And if you're weak on pronouns, go back and study them. Make sure you know how not just the nominative case of hemes, but the genitive case, hemon, and the dative case, hemin, and the accusative case, hemas. So you can recognize it if you is being addressed as an object of a sentence, or we, here in this case, hemes, is the subject of the sentence, the nominative case. So we, or our, or and so on. Which case? I don't have that problem in English so much, but I do have it in Greek. So those pronouns which we have had, and some of these we have not had. But if they're in the vocabularies in chapters 1 to 16, or now in vocabulary 18, in chapter 18, then we need to know them. Be sure and learn the table of first and second pronouns in all cases in section 14.3.3. So this is again a review. Go back, if you're weak on your pronouns, go back and make sure that you know them. Chapter 10, I believe, is a pronoun chapter. Chapter 13 is a pronoun chapter. And we need to review those. Okay. Now we're going to look at the English relative pronoun who. In English, it's not much of a problem. We still have some inflection in English. Now, whom, to whom, are a dative case, or whom did you ask? The object of the sentence, you did ask whom. Whom did you ask? emphasis even in English by putting it forward in the sentence, whom did you ask? Is falling out of use. And at least in the United States. In American English, we just say who. Who did you ask? That's not proper grammar, according to the grammar books, but it is the proper grammar in usage. But I like to keep as much as possible to traditional grammar forms if I can. So I do try to use whom. And so we're using it in the proper way. But I would guess that in 20 to 30 years, whom will be completely out of the picture. That's just the way languages develop. And we understand what a little bit more Koine Greek, what happened to classical Greek with Homer and Socrates and our philosophers, a little bit that we have written in classical Greek, is now changing in Koine Greek. Alexander the Great brought a number of languages into Greek, and although that we don't learn those languages, they still influence our Koine Greek.
Sorry, sir. Brother Finhas.
Okay.
Jesus.
So what did these look like in Greek? And if you study chapter 18, it's very simple. Hos, he, ho. The only thing that we need to look out for is that the rough breathing, not os, but hos. Otherwise, they look very much like the endings of the masculine and feminine neuter of the second declension nouns and the first declension nouns here in the feminine case, in the case of feminine. We don't have ta. Instead of ta, we have ha. And now they begin to look a lot like the articles, which we have learned, except in the masculine, they don't have ton, for example. There's no tau added. They just appear with a rough breathing. So hos, hon, hu, ho, with the iota subscript. So these would be the English meanings. Hos means who, and hon is accusative case and means whom. The action is happening, the direct object of the action is hon, if it's masculine. But if it's a lady, for example, or if it's a feminine word of any kind, then whom is a translation of hein. Now notice that in Greek, we make a distinction between masculine and feminine, but in English, we don't. So in English, we simply translate whom. But we do make a distinction with the neuter. So here we translate which or that. Now, we have to be careful that we don't confuse this with the other pronoun, this or that, because we're talking about a certain object. The writer may say this object that, or this object which, and we just had it actually in our verse in Matthew 1 verse 20, the that which is born in you is of the Holy Spirit. Literally that which. A paraphrase might say the baby which is born in you, but the text actually just uses a pronoun. So all of these are familiar to us. We just have to make sure that we don't get confused here by the masculine and feminine when we translate to English, to whom. And we don't have a plural form in English or to distinguish between the singular and the plural dative, to whom. Singular, to whom, plural. So we have to use whom, to whom. You might find an American who just says to who. And that's very improper grammar, but Americans are not known for keeping to good grammar. Whose, in both cases, singular and plural, masculine and feminine, are translated in English by whose, the genitive, expressing in particular the possessive. But with the neuter, we don't have a way of saying whose. It doesn't work with the neuter in English, so we have to say of which. In order, we have to use of to get the genitive case across in English. Now is the time to mention again words with small differences, and they're listed for you in one of the appendices in the book. And I would suggest strongly that you go to that appendix and make sure that you're familiar now with the differences. You can have ha, which, or that, which we just learned, the relative pronoun in the nominative neuter singular, or ha can be the article the, which we learned a long time ago in Greek 1. The difference between the two is the accent mark here. Both are rough breathing, ha. Notice the accent mark here, which distinguishes the neuter pronoun, which or that, in chapter 18 now. The same thing with hey, who, or that, the relative pronoun, which we're learning now with the accent, but hey without the accent is the. Hey epistole, the letter, the epistle. Hey gune, the woman. Hey cardia, the heart. So we know hey, but we have to be careful now when we have the accent to see, oh, this is actually the pronoun. But we've got a, which means or, and sometimes than. Conjunction. And even a couple more forms here, a with the iota subscript, which is the subjunctive active of eimi, the verb I am. Remember back in chapter 16 that the subjunctive forms of the verb eimi, he, she, or it might be, or it could be, depending on the context of the sentence. So we have the iota subscript, but it's pronounced the same, a. But we also have hey, to whom, in chapter 18 now. So all of these forms look very similar. A, hey, a, hey, and they all mean something different. And we just have to watch out for the marks that, because they are different. Here it's just a matter of the breathing mark, but they are different, very different in meaning. Same with who, of whom, we just learned in chapter 18. Don't confuse with u, which means not. Don't confuse the dative, to whom, to which, with the subjunctive present of eimi, which should have, if I'm not mistaken, an iota subscript as well. I'll check that out. No, it does not. Sorry, it does not have this. It does not have an iota subscript. The present subjunctive active. I might be. I could be. Of eimi. That's all it is. It's just this one letter O. but ho and o mean something entirely different. Then we have the articles, oi and ahoy and hi, but hoi with the accent again is who or that. So chapter 18 is actually very easy to learn, but you have to keep in mind that we have some small differences between idiomatic use of the relative pronoun. I'm going to have to save for next time. We're coming now to the end of our time. And oh, Ms. Zenaria has entered the room. And I didn't realize she was there, but I'm going to, Zenaria, are you there? You look like it. You're on my screen. Yes, you are. I'm going to make you a co-host just in case you have something you need to share with us. And is that the case? Did you need to make an announcement or? You may not be at the microphone. Okay, I will end the recording of the class